Hi guys, I'm going to upgrade my main PC. As well as being a video editor, I'm also a gamer, and so it's going to be a mid-price, bang-for-buck PC based on the AMD 2700X Ryzen CPU. This is the 8-core CPU. I think this represents really good value right now. The new Intel CPUs have just been released, really expensive. I think this is really good basis for a reasonably high-end but also value performance PC, and it'll be a good upgrade for me. I've actually got 4 sticks of DDR4 Corsair Vengeance high performance memory, so that's 4 sticks of 32 gigabytes in total, and it's the 3000 megahertz type. I think 32 gigabytes of RAM will be good for me with video editing in particular. It's not strictly necessary. I think I probably could have got away with 16, but 32 will obviously be better. This is the motherboard I've chosen. It's not a particularly high-end motherboard. It's the ASUS X470, so it's a new chipset. And the only thing that I was really looking for, apart from the basics obviously, is that I did want USB Type-C on the motherboard. I'm not really into LEDs and lighting, so I'm not really too worried about having LED controllers and other stuff. Graphics card I've gone for is the GTX 1080. The RTX 2070 and 2080 have been released. The 2080 is far too expensive for me. The 2070, this will give me 95% of the performance for 20% less, because I think that currently the GTX 1080 at the time of making this video represents really good value, because it's cheaper than the new generation of cards and certainly delivers very similar performance. For the games that I play and the work that I do, it's going to be more than adequate for us. This is an 8GB version, and I chose the Gigabyte one really just on price, to be honest. So that's why I chose that. I'm going to use a Corsair power supply. I've flirted with other power supply manufacturers, tried other suppliers, Seasonic, EVGA, but Corsair for me are the best and most reliable, and that's what I'm sticking with. This is 750 watts, which should be more than adequate. Storage wise, I've got 2 M2 SSDs, a 970 Pro and a 970 Evo. I'm going to use the Pro for the OS because it's got slightly better performance, although they'll both be pretty good, I think. And the Evo will be my main storage drive for games and video, so that I've got a little bit of extra storage. So I'll have a total of 1 terabyte of SSD storage in this computer. And I love the M2s, the fact they just attach to the motherboard and they take up no space and easy to install. And in the background there, you probably just see me heave the massive case onto the table. This is a Fractal Define XLR2 case. It's a huge tower case. I know lots of people are interested nowadays in making smaller computers. Personally, I like a nice big case, easy to install in, great cooling, sits under the table anyway, doesn't bother me, and it's much less fiddly on the install. So I just like to take all of the uncertainty out of it and just go with a massive case with good cooling. And this one comes fit with 3 fans. An extension lead, some Phillips screwdrivers and bits and pieces, cup of coffee, and we should be good to go. What's the time? Time is 4 minutes past 11 in the morning. Okay, and off we go. Right, so I think the first thing is to get the table clear, and I will start by looking at just doing a test of the CPU, memory and motherboard. Brilliant. So what we'll do is we'll set up the motherboard on top of the box just temporarily. We'll install the CPU, the RAM, the graphics card, all outside the case. We'll power it up and look for signs of life on the screen just to make sure that we haven't got any faulty components. And then when we've done that and we've confirmed that all the hardware is working correctly, we'll install it all in the case. Okay, so here's a motherboard. It's quite nice. I like the fact that it's got a little cooling section for the main M2 SSD. So we'll put it on the box here and we'll just have a quick look at, I'll have a good read through the manual and make sure I know where everything goes before we get started. Okay, I think we'll speed things up a little bit. Install the 4 sticks of RAM. I suppose the only downside of installing 4 sticks is future upgrades might be a bit difficult, but 32 gigabytes should be more than enough. And the next job obviously is to install the CPU, so we'll get it out of the box. And what I'll do is I'll probably just clip it in a minute, and here we go, and we'll just install it. There's a little lever to pull down, make sure that the little triangles are aligned and that it's firmly sat in its socket. I'll be using the stock cooler to cool this CPU. I'm not going to be overclocking it. My days of overclocking are long gone now. The M2 SSD, or at least the main one, sits under this little heatsink, and it's got an adhesive thermal pad that goes on it, which is quite difficult to get off, as you can see. I'm struggling with it a little bit, but yeah, the main the 970 Pro will sit underneath that little heatsink, and which screws it into the motherboard. Just as a reminder for those of you that are maybe using the same motherboard, there's actually a little stainless steel upstander that you can install into the screw socket if the screw isn't long enough to attach this in. So watch out for that. You do get it in this little packet, and it comes with the motherboard. Okay, don't overstress your M2 SSD by tightening the screw without the upstander in it. Now we're going to install the stock cooler. I think it's called the Wraith cooler, isn't it, this one? It comes with, I think, average performance and a configurable LED that I won't be using. But what I will do is, once we've completed the build, is I will show you how well the CPU is cooled by this particular Wraith cooler. Okay. I'm attaching the CPU cooler and the graphics card to the motherboard last before the test, just because it makes the motherboard that much more heavy and cumbersome to use or move around while you're installing stuff. That's just me checking to make sure that it's seated correctly on the CPU. Right. So the plan now is to hook up the CPU and mainboard connectors to the power supply, install the graphics card, connect up a screen, and just flick on the power and see if we get any signs of life and make sure everything's working. CPU, memory, and motherboard are all good. Trouble with graphics cards is they're such monstrous heavy things these days that you need to be careful not to damage your motherboard. So I'm going to move mine just to the edge of the box here, so that the little tabs have got some space to go over. You'll be really careful putting it in the slot that it doesn't overstress the PCI slot that it's sat in, because it's such a big heavy thing. Obviously the other thing we have to do now is obviously hook it up to power, and then we've got it hooked up to power because the graphics card needs its own power supply directly from the power supply itself. Then when that's done, we should be in a position to go ahead and give it a test. So we'll quickly plug in the power to the graphics card and plug in the power supply, and outside this video I've already plugged in the motherboard connectors for the CPU and the main board, and all that we need to do now is just click the start button. Well, I don't have a start button, so I'm going to short the 2 pins on the motherboard that are the equivalent of the start button. We'll see what happens. Okay, intelligent people like to switch on the power supply before they actually do that, so now I can see some lights on the motherboard. I'll have another go. Oh look, things are spinning. So all we're really looking for now is signs of life on the screen. You know, is everything up and running? Is it connected correctly? And some people may think that this is a bit of a waste of time. Why don't you just whack it all into the case? And I've done that in the past, and sometimes it works great, and other times it doesn't work great, and troubleshooting inside the case and having to take everything back out again because you've forgotten something or missed something is a real pain. I find doing this quick test on the box outside the case pays off every time, so I generally always do this with a build, and you've probably seen me do it in previous videos. So it's up to you. If you want to chance it and then throw it all in the box, good for you, go for it. Look, signs of life on the screen. That's got to be a good thing. So according to what I see there, everything that we've got installed so far, memory, CPU, graphics card, power supply, motherboard, is all working correctly. If we connect up a keyboard and go into the BIOS, we can see briefly that the main board has recognized the new CPU and just needs a little bit of setting up. So we'll do that. We'll go in and have a look, and as you can see, temperatures look okay. Not that that's a particularly good indication given that things that sat outside in the fresh air in my kitchen, but a good indication that there isn't any serious problems. Okay, so I think probably now we need to clear the table and get ourselves ready for the main install, put the main board in the case, and unfortunately to do that we have to take majority of what we've just done to pieces just so that we can reassemble properly inside the case. Okay, that's a blurry thumbs up, and it's time for us to get ourselves set up. Timing wise, it's 20 to 1. So we're about an hour and a half in, and to be honest, there's been quite a few distractions. I actually made the kids lunch, so you could go a lot faster than this if you wanted to, although I'm not sure that going fast at this stage is necessarily always the best idea. So we'll speed up the process of me clearing the table and putting the case on the table, which is a kind of major weightlifting task. Even by my standards, I'm wondering whether this cage isn't a little bit ridiculously more big than is necessary, but you know, for me, big is good. So you'll see me quickly take off the sides of the case, have a little look around inside, get the bag and bits and pieces out, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this second drive cage, which I won't need, just so that I've got a little bit more airflow and space in front of the fan. Right, good to go. So we'll change view and have a look inside the case on its side on the table, and you can watch me install the motherboard upstanders if you like. And you can see those little copper upstanders that fit into the case and support the motherboard, but it's going to be super boring, so let's hit the accelerator a little bit. So actually we'll install the motherboard shield first, and then I'll install 2 of the motherboard upstanders using a special screwdriver I've got, which fits them perfectly, but you could just do it with a spanner if you wanted to, and then I think that's probably enough. I think you get the idea. We'll fast forward through the installation of the PSU, the power supply, which is basically just 4 screws, not really very complicated or exciting. And then we'll shift orientation again, ready for the installation of the motherboard. So here we go, power supply installed. Now we'll move the case round and position it ready for the installation of the motherboard. When I trial fitted the motherboard the first time, I noticed that I'd installed 3 of the upstanders in the wrong position, so I had to shift them. So you can see me doing that at 8 times speed. And now we're ready to position the motherboard and install the securing screws. You can see me using a little plastic gripping tool to put the screws in position. Really you need a child's hands to install a computer. That would make it a lot easier if you happen to have a child's hands, that's great. But otherwise these little tools can help you just get a better grip of things. And you can see I'm using a head torch because if you've gone for the black color scheme inside your PC, it can be really difficult to see what's going on without really good lighting. So I've used a head torch there just to get a little bit better visibility. Okay, so we've got, I think, a total of 9 screws to install to get the motherboard correctly in position. And as you can see, I left the CPU, the RAM, and obviously the M2 SSDs in place while I installed it. So the initial install on the box has saved me a little bit of time. Installing all the motherboard connectors is probably one of my least favorite parts of the install, and ASUS motherboards come with this little adapter which makes it slightly easier, although I would still say a bit of a pain, and takes quite a long time and requires regular reference to the manual to make sure that you get everything correctly connected up. But it really is worth taking some time making sure you get this bit correct, because it will cause you problems in the future if you don't. And obviously also very important to check the motherboard manual for your particular motherboard to make sure you get all the connectors in the right place. I won't take you through the whole sequence because it'll take a long time and it won't make particularly good video watching, but essentially it's all documented in detail in the motherboard manual. So here's me having a look at the motherboard manual, checking the inputs and outputs before I do the fiddly part of connecting things up. Installing your graphics card is very straightforward, just like you did on the box. Just make sure the tabs are properly in the case and that the unit's properly clipped into the PCI slot. Obviously, make sure you put both bolts in, and don't forget to put your power leads in, but very straightforward. Right, that's pretty much it. So when we fire it up, all installed in the case, it shouldn't be too much of a surprise that things appear to be working, and if they aren't, then usually it's just because you forgot to plug something in. But we already tested this on the box and we know it works fine. Are we going to make a video about how to install Windows 10? No, I don't think so. No, it's basically whack in a USB stick and follow the instructions. So I'm not going to show you that. So while I mess around in the background, why don't we go through a few points and close the video out. In terms of the specifications, I'll put the full spec in the description of this video so you can have a look and see what I bought. I did have a go at benchmarking, but I had a little bit of trouble with Real Bench, which I now am reliably informed is a rubbish benchmark anyway. But suffice to say, this PC is substantially faster and particularly noticeable with the extra RAM and editing video. Really zippy, so I'm very happy with the performance. And again, I'll put a link to some more benchmarking of the new PC in the description because I'm going to use some 3D Mark scores to show how it performs. In terms of the actual components themselves, some comments on that. The big Fractal case is great. A huge case with loads of space, good sound deadening materials, and the unit runs pretty quietly, and the only time you can really hear it is when the graphics card kicks in under kind of high load. And so one comment I would make in the Gigabyte graphics card, I bought it on budget. It can be a bit noisy when it's on full load, when all the fans kick in, so that might be something to consider when you're looking for a 1080 if you are looking for a graphics card like mine. Otherwise the PC is nice and quiet. The stock cooler does its job on the CPU without any problems. Okay, I'm just going. So the total build time was under 4 hours, and there was some faffing around in the middle as well while I made lunch and bits and pieces. So I think that's about par for the course, isn't it? I think my other builds have taken about the same. I really like the M2 SSDs. They're great. They don't take up any space in the case. They just clip straight into the motherboard. And I would say if you're looking or in the market for an SSD, make sure you get M2 slots on your motherboard and buy M2 ones. They aren't much more expensive than the standard SSDs, and they're just so much better in every way. I can't really see any downside apart from a slight bump in price. So overall, I'm really happy with this build, really happy with the performance, and actually all of the components have performed very well. I'm pleased with the Corsair power supply as well. I've tried some other suppliers, but basically I always keep going back to them because they make great stuff. So, as usual, if you've got any questions, feel free to bump something in the comments below this video. I'm always happy to try and answer people's questions. I don't claim to be a mega PC building expert, but I've really enjoyed putting this together and I'm really enjoying using it. So, good luck with your build and let me know if you've got any questions. Cheers then. Bye-bye.